Part 3, Chapter 5. Room 101. Every time we go through this book, even though I know what's in Room 101, I get a little excited. Just a little bit. Because I remember back to my first time reading it, that moment at the very end of 3-4 when he pushes them and says, Room 101. And like I said many times, we know, well, we don't know, but the only thing we know about it mainly is that guy wanted off his whole family and slit his kids' throats and all that, and he'd be fine with it. So something pretty horrible is in Room 101. Okay, and we are now going to find out. It's like a big reveal. Okay, and we find out it's pretty. It's the worst thing in the world for Winston, whatever that may be. Page 283. You asked me once, said O'Brien, what was in Room 101? I told you that you knew the answer already. Everyone knows it. The thing that is in Room 101 is the worst thing in the world. Skip down. The worst thing in the world varies from individual to individual. It may be burial, alive, or death by fire, or by drowning, or by impalement, or 50 other deaths. There are cases where it is some quite trivial thing and not even fatal. Some people, it's the maybe claustrophobic, fear of airplanes. Okay, maybe it's fear of the dark, and you're just petrified. Do you remember the story I told you of my cousin with the shark? Yeah. Are you a bad mom? Yeah. You pushed her out of the way and ran to, because she shut it down. Okay, she shut it down, and she was almost paralyzed with fear, even though she probably ran faster than she's ever ran before. But she had that overwhelming fear. So something, probably shark-infested waters would be one of her Room 101 type situation. Page 285. Winston's 101 involves rats. How on earth did O'Brien know that Winston didn't like rats?
On the telescreen.
Ah, good. Sometimes it's a little slow in responding to that. The telescreen. Wait a minute, but he was in the apartment. Yeah, remember? There was a telescreen. They just didn't know about it. Can you imagine Charrington downstairs, when he's just sitting there reporting, and he sees him freaking out? What's he freaking out about? Rats. That might be important. Or he probably has to speak right. They probably don't write anything anymore, do they? Okay? But exactly. And that's one of the subtle things. And remember, Winston, almost quote, he said, of all the horrors in the world, rats. And remember how he squealed, and that was one of those moments that I said that you need to write this down, make an annotation, because this is something new we find out about characters. Okay, that's new, that's relevant. We should keep an eye on that. And we see that something that was just one line. It was really probably only about that much of your book, wasn't it? Really? That whole freaking out scene? It was probably only about that much of the book, but yet we see how much that plays into his final breakdown. Okay, that he has here on this page. Could you envision the contraption that they put on him? Could you envision it? It's almost something like, I kind of look at it as some sort of like a catcher's mask in baseball, affixed to you, but longer. Okay, and it's caged off with sections, and the rat's down here at the end. And you lift up a partition, and it comes. Lift it up, comes. When I was a kid, they had a Nerds cereal. It didn't last very long. You know the Nerd candy? They had Nerd cereal. They had Super Mario Brothers cereal, because that was the NES years, the old 8-bit system. Those that know what I'm talking about know exactly what I'm talking about. The rest of you are like, nerd. Anyways, we had a bowl, and there was a divider, and you could fill up half of your bowl with milk and the other half with your cereal. And then you could just lift the partition, and it would flood together. It's pretty amazing. Probably cost $30,000 proof of purchases and $8 shipping. I don't remember. But I just remember the partition. And in essence, that's what this mask is. And Winston, all he can see is blackness in front of him. A bar. A wall. And there's more walls. Okay, so are we picturing this? And then O'Brien can lift it, and the thing's hungry, so it keeps coming, and then it's on the other side, and you could hear him trying to come through. Can you imagine what Winston's doing and going through? Just the notion of a rat threw him up onto the bed and made him squeal. I don't recall him seeing the rat. Wasn't it just Julia's saying that there was a rat? Pretty sure that was the case. But here he hears it. And he's transported back to his dreams. If you recall, throughout some of his dreams, he's heard something scratching on the other side of the wall. And O'Brien even comments on it here that you've always known what was on the other side of the wall, haven't you, Winston? You know that's that fear. And it's just right there. It's just on the other side. Where's some of that description that he gives them? It's just brutal. The very bottom of 285. The mask will fit over your head, leaving no exit. When I press this other lever, the door of the cage will slide up, and these starving brutes will shoot out of it like bullets. And they're getting closer and closer and closer. Down the bottom, sometimes they attack the eyes first, sometimes they burrow, because once they get to, there's no metal, there's no obstruction, it's been lifted, then they just dive into the face. Sometimes they'll go through the cheeks, go out the eyes. Pretty brutal, okay? There was a movie, I think it was the second Fast and the Furious. There was this, I think it was a Chinese biker gang, and they laid some guy down on the ground. They took a metal pail, trash can bucket, and put a rat in it, and then they put it on the guy's stomach.
Oh, I thought that was Bad Boys.
No, I think it's Fast and Furious, because it was a biker gang. They put the rat in the bucket, and then so it can't escape. The only way it can't go through metal. The rat in Winston's cage can't go through the metal, and so then where's it going to go? The flesh. And so all of a sudden they take a blowtorch and start heating up the metal. And so the rat's like, ooh, hot. Oh, warm, cool. Start burrowing in. And that was their torture, their pain device. Okay? So this rat would do, it's not like, I'm going to get to kill a man. No, it's like survival. I'm hungry. Where can I go? Well, it's a cage all around, and now there's flesh. Start diving through. Pretty brutal and scary, especially if you're scared of rats. If you're scared, because imagine being strapped down. You're strapped down. You can't move. Your head might be strapped. You just see. I'm not scared of rats, but that would be pretty freaky. Okay? And it's coming, and you hear it. If you saw the movie Signs, it's an M. Night Shyamalan movie, it's an alien type movie with Mel Gibson. Great movie. And you don't see aliens at all, I'm not spoiling anything, until the very end. But you see their shadows and fingers and all of these different things. And I listened to the commentary and I saw interviews with the director. And he goes, the fear of not knowing, the fear of knowing something's there but can't see it. The sound of hearing, if they're in the basement and they hear the alien walking in the house, just hearing the floor creak, knowing what's going on up there. Can you envision that? If we were here quietly and there was some burglars or somebody in the house, or the Holocaust with Anne Frank, you hear people walking, and then stopping, and you know that they're up there listening and looking around. That's scary. And so for Winston, he can't see the rat. He can hear it, for sure. He can probably smell it. He can probably feel the vibrations in the cage. And he's just going nuts. Nuts, which is ultimately what O'Brien needs to break him. Page 286, follow with me, the top paragraph in the middle. There was a violent convulsion of nausea inside of him, and he almost lost consciousness. Everything had gone black. For an instant, he was insane, a screaming animal. Yet, he came out of the blackness clutching an idea. There was one and only one way to save himself. He must interpose another human being, the body of another human being between himself and the rats. Think about it. Remember, tied down, that thing's right there. The only thing, and that rat's one partition away. The only way to get away from this is to put another human being in the middle between the rat and him, so that rat will get that individual and not Winston. That's the only way. And that's the only way. And who's the only person that he can think of? Who's the only person? Julia. Now, imagine this scene. He's the panicked, freaked out character that he is. And O'Brien's going, oh, this was a common punishment in Imperial China, blah, blah, blah. But he was suddenly understood in the whole world. There was just one person to whom he could transfer the punishment. One body that he could thrust between himself and the rat. And he was shouting frantically over and over, do it to Julia, not me, Julia. I don't care what you do to her. Tear her face off, strip her to the bones, not me, Julia, not me. He was falling backwards into enormous depths away from the rats. He was still strapped to the chair, but he had fallen through the floor, so he was descending. He was just feeling, just blacking out and so on. But the last line of this is important. There was still the cold touch of a wire against his cheek, but through the darkness that enveloped him, he heard another metallic click and knew that the cage door had clicked shut and not open. So can you imagine O'Brien just sitting there? Imagine. And he hears him do that, and it's just like, getting ready to pull it up. Because he won. Winston has held out hope and the hatred for Big Brother, and he's held on to that love and feelings for Julie, and he wouldn't betray. And now that was the last straw, the last thing. Because in 3-4, we see Winston putting on weight, and he was actually, and O'Brien said, intellectually, there's hardly anything wrong with you. It's just emotionally that there's a problem. And so here, that emotional, it's gone, it's shattered, it's done. And O'Brien knows he's done. I finally won. It's over. Okay, and that's where it's just the sound of a click, because Winston is just kind of still passing out in darkness and so on. And that's 3-5. Now 3-6. Chapter 6 on 2, 8, 7, and so on. Look at the setting of this scene. The setting of the scene is the Chestnut Tree Cafe. As Winston pointed out to us previously, this is a place where a lot of people who embarrassed party members tend to go and hang out. It's a place that rumor had it Goldstein had frequented in the past, or had been seen there. And now Winston is a disgraced, embarrassed party member. And he's there. He's changed. He's broken. He is everything that O'Brien said he would be. Okay? Remember when he made him run through those lines? Would you do this? Would you do this? Would you do this? Would you betray Julie or not? Would you promise never to see her again? And they both said no. And then O'Brien said, good. We needed to know that. So O'Brien kind of knew that they had a connection. And so he was probably taking notes on those individuals about what their breaking point is going to be. But he promised Winston, and even Julia said, Julia, if he gets caught, you will never recognize him. I'm not just talking physically, emotionally. As a person, he will not be the same person. O'Brien told Winston as much. He goes, we will, and I think I paraphrased, but I said, we will wipe your hard drive and reprogram you the way we want. And Winston is that. He's back drinking his what do we call it? Gin, his victory gin. He's back, with his painful ulcers on his legs. He's back to the way he was really at the beginning, just minus the rebellious nature. Okay? So it's important to understand that transformation was huge. Another little thing I just highlighted, it's not really significant to the overall thing of the book, but it's just kind of something to notice. He's playing chess. If you notice it, he goes white, play, and mate in 2 moves. Winston looked up at the portrait of Big Brother. White always mates, he thought, with a sort of cloudy mysticism. I'm not a big, I don't know how to play chess. I understand the pieces and such, but I don't know how to play. I just know you always hear him say checkmate, mate, check, when I win and such. But anyways, he goes, always without exception, it is so arranged, in no chess problem since the beginning of the world has black ever won. Doesn't that just kind of put the cherry on the top about this Big Brother world where white always wins over black, no matter what? It's just mathematically impossible for the other to win. But we all know that, wait a minute, so you're telling me if we played checkers, red would win all the time and black would lose, or black would win and red would lose all the time? It just shows you that. And since recorded history and time, well, we know that Big Brother controls all that past and all that history, and so you probably can't find any known record where that is. But we know that's just utter ridiculousness. It's ridiculous. Ridiculous. You seen those Dairy Queen commercials? Ridiculous. Clever. Somebody made a lot of money just because hey, that sounds a lot like DQ. Hey, there's a commercial. 290. Playing in the dust. He all of a sudden started writing down 2 + 2 = 5 without even thinking about it. This is significant because it shows that he fully accepts it and believes it. Because it's like a doodle. You guys have all doodled before, right? When I'm on the phone, I'm usually doodling, talking and stuff, and then when I'm done, I'm like, oh, I don't know what that is. Maybe a house with a star. I don't know. You know, you just start doing things. Subconsciously in the dust, he writes out 2 + 2 = 5. It's not really significant to him in the Chestnut Tree Cafe, but for us, we can see how far Winston has been broken and how far Winston has been transformed. And it makes us, I would think, sad as the reader to see what has truly transpired. $290, $291, $292. One last twist, one last surprise. Aha! Oh, I didn't see that coming. He runs into Julia. Now, if you recall, back when they were the thought police SWAT team breaks in and pulls them out, and they're beating up on her and drag her out, he says that that's the last time he ever sees Julia. Is that still a true statement? Think about it. Maybe that was a dream? I don't recall it. If you find it, you can let me know. I believe the last time he saw her, and he said that that was the last time I ever saw her. Because when we got to that point, I told you specifically, I remember the words I said, that that's the last time that he ever saw Julia, that they ever, were in the same room with the same relationship that they had. Because that Winston and Julia ceased to exist at that point. Okay? Even when O'Brien informed Winston that Julia had cracked and betrayed him, you wouldn't even recognize her anymore. You wouldn't even, all of that wickedness, all of the pervertedness was all just flushed out of her. You wouldn't even recognize her. And so the individuals that fell in love, okay, and spent all that time together, those individuals are, for the most part, dead. They're different. Is this Winston the same Winston that did all those things? No. So them together was really kind of awkward here because they know that they have a history together, but they also realize that I'm not in love with you anymore. Is he sexually attracted to her at all anymore? No, she's not hot and young anymore. Well, she's still young, but she's bigger now. There's no lust. He has no feelings of lust towards her, let alone lust at all. Because he knows a good party member isn't supposed to be getting with other party members. So that thought isn't even there anymore. It's been burned out. Okay? It's just imagine the most awkward encounter possible. And that's this. On page 292, she says, I betrayed you. He says, I betrayed you. Sometimes they threaten you with something you can't stand up to, can't even think about, and then you say, don't do it to me, do it to somebody else, do it to so-and-so. Blah, blah. But at the time, when it happens, you do mean it. No matter how much I love you and how much you love so-and-so, you're just so crazy at that moment that you really mean it. And this is her telling him and explaining to him what her breaking was like. And we know that Winston's was exactly the same way. The only way he knew he could survive further was to put her, because that's the only name that came to his mind, that's the only person he really has any relationship with, put her in between him and the oncoming rat, and so on. You want it to happen to the other person. You don't give a damn what they suffer. All you care about is yourself. All you care about is yourself. He echoed. And after that, You don't feel the same toward the other person any longer. No, you don't feel the same. Because you know that we have betrayed. We have broken those feelings, that connectedness. I would die for you. I would do anything for you. But you know now that that's not true anymore. And you can't go on with that relationship. And so they part ways. Winston goes back to the Chestnut Tree Cafe. He has a couple moments. He hears that song, and this is significant. Remember, underneath the spreading chestnut tree, I sold you and you sold me. Does that line have a little bit more stake to us now? I sold you and you sold me. I betrayed you and you betrayed me. Think back to the other chestnut tree with the three guys in the picture. When that song plays, Winston noticed that they started to cry. Do you recall this? If not, just make a little note. You'll want to go back and check that out. Because that's a clue to something that now that we've experienced it with Winston and then secondhand through Julia, we know what those three guys went through and that they ultimately had to betray, maybe not necessarily each other in the group, but they had to betray somebody and somebody betrayed them and they cried and couldn't deal with it. And we see Winston going through the same emotions with those same lines and so on. The very last scene, where are we at? Well, before I get there, 296. It's interesting because we find out, just in his mind, how his mind's working, what he's doing. It talks about how he is doing more gin and more different things throughout the, back to the way he was. But right around the middle of 296, when he says he pushed, excuse me, the line before that, for a whole afternoon they had all been happy together as in an earlier childhood. All of his, he pushed the picture out of his mind. It was a false memory. He was troubled by false memories occasionally. Are these really false memories, do you think? Do you remember how before he had memories? Those weren't false back then. Those were his history, and those things and visions that he had played out to be true. Those remembrances of his mother, and so those were true. But now, any of these things, he goes, oh, no, I'm not thinking properly. Those are false memories. They're not real. So he's not giving any credibility. He's not giving any thought to those memories. He's not building and trying to analyze and figure out what the purpose of them is or are anymore. Okay? Do we see how he's completely changed? And even mentally here, he's not performing for O'Brien. He's not performing for anybody. But yet he, in his mind, he's still, oh, those are false memories. He's still playing the game, playing the rules of Big Brother, and no one's around him. So he's fully indoctrinated in their beliefs at this particular time. So it's a very telling moment. Very telling. Where are we at? Last page. The very end, the last couple pages actually, but the very last page is what we're going to look at here. He hears war correspondences going on. He knows to look up. He looks up at a picture of Big Brother sitting there staring at him, and he has a moment. I may have used the term before, an epiphany. He has this revelation. Big Brother is protecting us. Big Brother is all of these wonderful things. And the last couple lines, 2 gin-scented tears trickled down the sides of his nose, but it was all right. Everything was all right. The struggle was finished. He had won the victory over, not the party, over himself. He loved Big Brother. Okay? It's not the ending that a lot of people, mainly everybody that reads this, hopes for. We want him to be that Robin Hood, and like we've talked about, lead the proles. But we see this person tragically succumb to the party, and Big Brother, and O'Brien. Remember how I hate him. I hate him. Oh, that's good. It's not enough that you hate him. It's not enough that you actually do all that intellectual stuff and accept him, that way you got to do it emotionally. And so for him here, he goes, the victory over, I've cured myself. I am not insane anymore. I'm not struggling with what it was. I am a sane person. And I love Big Brother. I love Big Brother. Isn't that a sad line? Don't you, those that actually read this and experienced the journey with us, aren't those just sad? because we know how completely opposite his true feelings were about Big Brother and about everything that the party stood for. And now he's a card-carrying member, bugle-blowing person for the party. What's going to happen to him next? Party forget about him? You think the party's going to forget about Winston since he's a good boy and has done his own thing? Did they forget about the three guys in the pictures after they were reformed and gave speeches and wrote articles about how horrible they were and how treasonous they were? No. He even mentioned on the previous page, what's he waiting for? Walking down the hall and then somebody pops out of a door and gets you in the back of the head. Because it's coming. O'Brien told him, even if we release you, you're not getting away from us. We're going to get you. You will die for this. But they weren't going to make a martyr out of him. They weren't going to let him die holding on a little piece of defiance against Big Brother. They're going to break him, refill him up, and send him back. Now it's a party victory. If we had killed him still holding out that love for Julia, it would have been a victory for Winston. And Winston even said that with Julia. They can't make us feel. They can't change our feelings. And so even if we die, we still win. And O'Brien and the party understands this. And so that's why they must break you. It's like in Rocky IV. I'll break you. If you've ever seen the Russian. It's a great line. Not a great movie, but it's okay.